Hi, I'm Jim Higley, Chief Brand Officer for MtM, and I'm delighted to lead this training session for our dedicated advisory board members, discussing the many details about our chapter's Make the Magics. In my role at MtM, I've overseen our national fundraising events, which have collectively raised millions of dollars. And while our chapter level Make the Magic events are not intended to be mini versions of these national events, we have taken many of the best practices we've learned at a national level and adapted them for these chapter level events. During the session today, I'll give you an overview of our Make the Magics, help you better understand your role, give you insight to the training materials and resources our students have and need to use, and explain your post-event role as an advisory board member. For most of our chapters, their Make the Magic is easily the largest fundraising event of the year and something they spend a majority of the school year planning for. Beyond the critical funds raised at these events, a successful Make the Magic also provides important opportunities for supporters and new supporters to engage with our mission, which is done through thoughtful programming, which I'll talk about a little more later. Make the Magics are also important opportunities for our student leaders to develop new skills, as they do with all aspects of our leadership development program. This is a really important point for all of us to be aware of and patient with sometimes, as we remind ourselves that putting on an event of this scale at a young age of 20-something-year-olds comes with many first experiences. I say this with firsthand experience myself. My youngest son is a MtM student leader and happens to be his chapter's Make the Magic coordinator. I'm sure you can imagine how tempting it is for me to step in and do things for him. That's why I regularly remind myself that he's gaining invaluable life skills as he navigates through the process and relies on pretty fantastic training materials that are always at his fingertips. I mentioned earlier that our Make the Magics are not meant to be mini versions of our national events. They're also not meant to be galas, and we need to view them through and we need to not view them through the same lens we do big ticket charity events that we may have experience with in our own communities. I've been to some really successful Make the Magics where people dress super casually. I've also been to others where the atmosphere was a little more business casual. There's really no right or wrong way to approach this from a dress perspective. The glue, however, that binds all of our successful Make the Magics together is solid programming and guest experiences, which we'll spend a lot more time talking about in just a few minutes. So let's talk about your role as an advisory board member. There's three specific things we ask of you. First, and most importantly, as outlined in your advisory board agreement, we want and need you there. We also need you to bring guests who you feel would connect with the MtM mission. You all have, I believe, a specific number of guests that you are responsible for. We've learned through our national events that the single best way to introduce new people to MtM is through our events. So I cannot stress enough how important this role is for you and how much we depend on it. Your guests will appreciate, as they experience firsthand the passion of our student leaders and hear directly about the impact this mission is making in the local community. A quick word about your guests. There are really two ways you can handle guests. One is to simply purchase a table or two and invite people to join you as your guests. The second way is for you to assemble a table of guests, with each one covering their own ticket cost. There's really no right way, and you need to do what you are most comfortable with. Your second role for Make the Magics is to provide insight and advice, especially in key areas that we'll talk about in a couple minutes. But as I mentioned before, your job is not to run the event. It's much like you're teaching your own child how to ride a bicycle. You gotta be there to make sure they don't totally fall down and cut themselves, but give them plenty of room to really learn how to navigate this on their own. And your final role and final area of responsibility is to provide specific support when you can. Maybe you have a friend who's a caterer and you're willing to make an ask for your students to get a discount. That would be wonderful support after you've talked through this potential request with your Make the Magic coordinator. Or maybe you have a strong relationship with a potential sponsor. Again, in consultation with your Make the Magic coordinator, your support with these types of asks and help is just really critical and greatly appreciated. In the next two slides, I want to give you a high-level overview as to the general timeline our student leaders try to follow when preparing for their own Make the Magic. So, of particular importance is the last column, which gives you ideas about areas you can help. So 6 months ahead of time, we're focusing on getting a date and a location set. So the students are working on researching venues and dates for the event. You need to help, and where you can help is if you know of any venues, especially ones that are free or lower price, share those with your coordinators. Also give input on dates. Sometimes our students aren't aware of like local things like spring breaks or conflicts, conflicting weekends and stuff, so help with that. As we get 5 months ahead of time, again, there's still a lot of stuff going on with the venue, caterers, and figuring out ticket prices. So that's where our students are focusing on. Again, you can be helping with some of the support services, caterers, florists, and stuff, helping connect our students with those people. 4 months out, we're working hard on a guest list. I should mention what we tell our students is if you need to develop a guest list that's 4 to 5 times the size of your anticipated total guests. So if you want 100 people at your event, you need to be inviting 500 people. That's what we've learned from a national level. So our students are 4 months out are working hard to build a guest list, which certainly is comprised of people who have attended in the past, sending out save the dates. What you can be doing is building your guest list as well, and really starting to support our student leaders with who you want to invite. And also, I would also urge you to reach out to those people as well personally, and just ask them to put the date on their own calendar. 3 months out, we're again working, fine-tuning the guest list, and also starting things like our paddle raise donors, and we'll talk more about paddle raise level later. But trying to identify potential lead bidders for our main fundraising event at our Make the Magics, the paddle raise. So there's a lot of moving targets at that 3 month level, 3 month time frame out. You should be personally, at this point, certainly personally inviting your guests, helping support our students if you know of any attendees who might be candidates for leading our paddle raise gifts. And again, if you know of anything that might help them with decor or caterers or anything like that, in-kind gifts, certainly help them out. As we get to 2 months out, again, it's a lot of starting the details, that sponsors and things like people who potentially can offer matching gifts for our paddle raise are a big part of it. Speakers, our students have very clear directions on how to identify potential speakers for the event and basically pulling the program together. You should be making your big push with your own guests. Again, helping in any way with with lead donors, and things like if you know a photographer, that's always a good thing. That sometimes our students don't have access to a professional photographer. A month ahead of time, man, things are in full mode in terms of putting together the timeline, finalizing our budgets, confirming all the volunteers, the student leaders who will be there, printing the program. At this point, you just want to step in and offer any kind of support that they need, filling in some of the blanks where they just need extra people to do things, and that really takes you through the final weeks where they're really running through all the details. So the last few weeks, there's usually a lot of activities, and if you are supporting the students in any way, now's a good time to raise your hand and offer to just to be an extra body sometimes. All right, so briefly, just to let you know a little bit about resources, which I mentioned earlier, we have great resources for our Make the Magic coordinators. Their training manual, their guide, is actually 55 pages long, and it's full of information for our student leaders on how to run a successful Make the Magic. You've been provided a link to this training materials just to give you a glimpse of what's provided to the students, but by no means do we expect any of you to read all through it. They also have a workbook which complements the guide. The workbook is where the students record everything pertaining to their efforts, such as budgets, notes, guest lists, tasks, contracts, etc. These are both important tools that our program director, who's on our staff, uses in their regular calls and meetings with our Make the Magic coordinators. And as we've learned, an important part of keeping our students' work visible and measurable. Next, I'd like to share with you what we teach our students are the 6 steps of a successful event, which serves as the backbone for how the overall flow of every Make the Magic should look. I'm also sharing this with you so you understand some of the methodology and strategy for some of the specific things we ask our student leaders to take care of and to ensure it takes place at every Make the Magic. The 6 key steps, I'll walk you through them, then we'll go into them a little bit more detail. Step 1, welcome and introduce people to our KESM community. Step 2, nourish them in a small community. Step 3, reunite them into a group. Step 4, move them. And that's not physically move them, that's emotionally move them and create a goosebump moment. Step 5, invite them to support KESM. And step 6, as always, thank them. Let's break those down a little bit further. Step 1, when we talk about welcoming and introducing introducing our guests, that includes a super fast and easy check-in process, making sure all of our guests feel welcomed immediately. Keep them mingling. We really try to encourage our students to set up that first hour, a typical cocktail hour might be the scenario, to make sure guests stay up on their feet. We don't want our guests just to come and sit down at tables and kind of talk to their own groups. That's why we have activities. We call them activations, where our guests can experience KESM. And those might include things like taking on a camp name or putting on a friendship bracelet or other things that our student leaders are given tools to oversee during that first hour of the event. We also encourage our students to do these activations by going to the guests, like taking them literally to the guests, as opposed to having a booth where guests have to come and stand in a line to experience the activation. Step 2, smaller communities. Dinner. What we're talking about here is really dinner. So people now are moved into their pre-assigned tables to sit down. It gives people an opportunity to have more intimate, private conversations in smaller groups. During that time, you'll see that there will be a brief welcome by our co-directors, welcoming everyone to the evening, letting them know what the course of the night's going to be like. And it also gives everyone an opportunity to understand what the programming is going to be like in 30 minutes or so, and kind of set expectations. So our guests who are now seated having dinner understand kind of how the rest of the night's going to progress. We do a lot of things at our tables, also that we consider activations, like inviting our guests to make luminary bags in memory or honor of someone impacted by cancer in their life. So we kind of continue this process of making them feel connected to the cause in a more personal way. You'll see things going on in the background, hopefully, like slideshows that are running in the background during dinner, where while people are eating their dinner can still see imagery of things that take place at our camps. Table hosts. Just a brief note about table hosts. We ask that all of our tables have hosts that are student leaders. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a student leader seated there, although it could be. Let's say there's a family that has a student leader's family has a table. Chances are the student or students that are part of that family would be designated as a table host, and what their job is to make sure conversation, that people meet each other, that there is some level of conversation about Camp KESM, kind of a brief introduction of who they are as students, and basically being the person to make sure everyone at the table is having a good night. They also play a critical role at the end of the night to make sure that those people who make donations are processed in an efficient manner. Table hosts also can be assigned to tables where a student leader is not seated. So let's say, for example, we have a corporate sponsor there, a bank that might have a table of 8 or 10 people, and there's no student there. There still will be a table host assigned to it, but that student leader would walk up to the table once people are seated, introduce themselves, let them know who they are, and thank the guests for being there, and basically be a person who keeps their eye on that table to make sure the evening's going smoothly. They'll step back at the end of the night and again help process any donations as well. Step 3, reunite them. So now after 30, 40 minutes or so, and people have been having a nice time with their own table, talking to their fellow dinner mates. Now it's time to reunite people back and kind of get the energy level going back up. The most common thing we do at that point is play a game called Heads and Tails. It's a fun game that it doesn't cost anything for anyone. We suggest there's a prize at the end of it. It could be something like a $25 gift certificate or something of not significant value, but still kind of fun to win. It's a fun game. There's a psychology in terms of doing this, and this we definitely take from our national events. This is the time of the night where you're preparing, ultimately to have a paddle raise and raise money for the chapter. It's important to create room dynamics where people feel comfortable cheering for each other and feel like a community. And so there's a really strong psychology in terms of playing Heads and Tails. It's not just meant to be fun. It's actually meant to build some kind of team spirit amongst the room. After the paddle raise, after the Heads and Tails, we also do a paddle practice. And again, this is kind of a simple process where the host, the student leader host, will make sure everyone has their paddles, which they should have been given when they checked in, and has a couple fun things for them to use it, like asking questions like raise your paddle if you've ever been to a Make the Magic, or raise your paddle if you've ever attended camp as a child or something like that. Again, the reason for doing this is to get people accustomed to raising a paddle publicly in a group setting, and hopefully they'll feel comfortable enough that they'll use it in a few minutes when we actually do the real paddle raise. Step 4 we call Goosebumps, and this is now the part of the night where we're really transitioning the room and the program into a high point of emotion. And so we transition from the Heads and Tails and the paddle practice to 2 speakers. We tell our students to limit the speakers to 2. It can be any combination of an older camper, a camper parent, or a student. We tell them to keep the respective speeches to 4 to 5 minutes apiece. And we also make sure our student leaders review and have input on those speeches ahead of time, just to make sure messaging is on point and not redundant from one speaker to the next. After the 2 speakers, we have a video, which is 90% of the time going to be a video provided by Camp Kesem National. It's a 4 to 5 minute video, and again, it's a solid, firm way of ensuring some very very strong programming that we know works. So the students have access to 2 different videos nationally that they can use as well. So that's step 4, building up to the Goosebumps. And then if everything has gone according to plan and the emotion and the energy in the room is super high, then that's the perfect time to invite them to support our cause through the paddle raise. And so you'll see a student leader leading the paddle raise. They're well trained on it. They have a video exactly how to do it. It's fully scripted. It's important to have larger gifts confirmed first. So the paddle raise always starts at the higher level. So it might be $5,000, it might be $2,000, it might be $1,000. It really depends on each chapter. Different chapters have different capacities for levels of support, but you always want to start at you start at the higher level and you work your way down to smaller gifts. It's critical for especially all the higher level gifts, though, to have the lead gifts confirmed. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier in the months leading up to the Make the Magic, to try to confirm people who are definitely going to be in the room who are planning on making a gift, to have them set and confirmed to be, say, the lead gift if it's determined that the first gift is going to be at the $2,500 level. It's nice to know that that person is in the room and they're planning on making a $2,500 gift. It just creates a sense of excitement. So for the higher level gifts, having someone in place who will definitely raise their paddle is super advisable, and you can help greatly with that. And the most, as you'll see in the paddle raise, if you've never been there, the energy levels are really high. Our students are very good at cheering and clapping, and that creates just a lot of excitement in the room. And the synergy in the room oftentimes builds on itself, and they're usually pretty overwhelming experiences to watch. A significant amount of funds being raised in a relatively short period of time. So that's kind of what takes place during step 5. And then step 6, of course, as we always remind our students, practice and show gratitude. And you'll see that even during the paddle raise. Every single person who raises her paddle is always thanked. So it'd be like, thank you, paddle number 45. Thank you, paddle number 75. It's an important part of the process of making people feel not only feeling our gratitude, but feeling like they're part of the community. After the paddle raise, our co-directors will come up and give a very brief thank you, and then the most key way to show our gratitude after what has now been a wonderful night is to process people's donations quickly and expeditiously, and then follow up over the course of the next week or so with thank you notes and receipts for all of our donors. So those are the 6 steps that we build into all of our programs. You will see them pretty tightly followed at your event. We wanted you to understand why we do what we do, and why some of the things that we believe strongly in are put in place in the way they're there. So in summary, I hope this overview to our Make the Magic provides you strong insight regarding this mission-critical event, and I hope it gives you a framework for discussions and support that I know you're happy to give our students in your meetings and various interactions with them. As mentioned earlier, your support in bringing guests to this event is so important, and we are so grateful to you for that. We're also grateful for your help in securing lead donors for our paddle raise. Candidly, these 2 items, guests and paddle raise leads, are often the most daunting task for our students. So your help with these is really, really important. But I also can't stress how important your role is to coach, encourage, and model for our students the night of the event. I'll give you an example. I think I mentioned earlier, I oftentimes have found myself going to an event and realize the students aren't super comfortable how to handle a cocktail hour. They're not comfortable with cocktail hours with adults. So you can help immensely by mingling with the crowd, going and introducing yourself to some of our guests, especially if there's sponsors that are there who might not be super familiar with Camp Kesem. Kind of model for our students, and also walk up to some of our students and remind them that they need to be mingling with our guests and making people feel welcome as if they were in our home. So there's definitely some really solid things that you can help with even the night of, simply by showing our students how to navigate a social setting. So post event, some of your roles, they're all probably very obvious to you, but we appreciate you thanking all of your guests who came with you or supported you. An email is always a wonderful way to follow up with them. Make sure our students have all of your guests' information, because we will certainly want to invite them next year. And then be a part of the debriefing, and especially if you have both positive or helpful criticism for our students, make sure that works its way back to our Make the Magic coordinators as well. And of course, if you ever have any questions or concerns or anything, take them directly first, to your Make the Magic coordinator, to your co-directors, and you are always certainly welcome to reach out to our staff program directors as well with anything that you might want to share or offer. So I hope this has been helpful. Our Make the Magics are really fun, so make sure you get it on your calendar. If you've never been, you'll be very proud of our students and see what they can accomplish at this really important event. So thank you again.